Just to change. Yeah, isn't it?
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive Scrutiny Board on Monday, the 12th of August, here at the Council House in Derby. Do I have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Matthew Holmes, and Councillor Jamie Mulhall is stuck in a meeting, but he'll be here as soon as he can.
Councillor Mulhall will be joining us. Anybody else?
Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Philip Ingle. Thank you.
Okay. We invited the Cabinet member, I believe, for Children's, just to go through some of the issues on tonight's paper, but he's not responded to either of the invites and isn't here tonight, so I'll take that up with him personally when I see him next, when I make contact with him next, because I think there are occasions when calling on the Cabinet member is justified, but obviously not for Councillor Hazelgrave. We'll see. Any late items? I don't believe there are. Declarations of interest, please. No? Minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Forward plan. Any particular items on the forward plan that's new or not new or should be there and aren't there? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 6. It's just a housekeeping, really. It says acting strategic director Sam Dennis. I thought she was in post now, not acting. Is that incorrect? Or is it? So that the word acting needs to be deleted from page 6, I suggest then, Chair. Just to prove I've read the document. Yeah.
I'll just reiterate something I said at the beginning of last year and this year in relation to the forward plan. It is important that officers recognise that any significant items that will come to Cabinet, that they know will come to Cabinet, are included in the forward plan, because we as an Exec Scrutiny Board and the other scrutiny boards need the opportunity to understand when they're coming and have the opportunity to scrutinise these papers. There's one in tonight's papers that wasn't in there, hasn't been in the forward plan and is needed to go in as a late item effectively, and that's item 9 in relation to the SEND alternative provision. So I'll be taking that up with the officers when we get round to that, but I just want to reiterate that as Chair of Exec Scrutiny, take a very dim view of items not being, of the forward plan not being up to date and not being adhered to. So again, something I'll take up maybe with the leadership. Yes, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. We have spoken in the past about the regeneration projects in the marketplace and the assembly room, future of the assembly rooms, and the regeneration scrutiny committee did receive a report from officers about the future of that site, and it was really quite helpful actually. So just to put that on record, Chair, because I know we've discussed it here at this board as well. So that has now happened, and I think all the members of that committee found it very helpful.
Thank you. Yes, Martin, better late than never. We did have to push it, and the Regeneration Board pushed it for a while, and we were promised it, and prior to the election, I think, it didn't come. But at least members of that board have a better understanding now of what it is that's in the background and on the way for the marketplace, which is, again, a very important paper. So, yes, noted. Any other comments on the forward plan? No? Okay, then we'll move straight to the Council Cabinet agenda. There are the usual first, 6 and 7 items. Recommendations from the Executive Scrutiny Board were heard at the last Cabinet meeting, and the responses in the papers. So we'll move on straight on to item 8, the Children's Accommodation Strategy, D2N2 Specialist Children's Residential Homes. Yes. Could you state your name and...
Yes, good evening everyone. My name's Kath Young. I am Head of Children's Commissioning, Brokerage and Market Management in the People's Directorate. So I'm here tonight just to talk through some highlights from the D2N2 Children's Specialist Home Report. So this report details quite an exciting, innovative and integrated approach delivering a new model of care for our most complex children and young people. And the concept is working as a team around the child. The project itself, the strength of the project is the joint approach with health, education and social care, with the ambition to continue to work in partnership with providers to deliver a service in a very creative way, which will meet our children and young people's outcomes and prevent them from inappropriate hospital admission and support step down from Tier 4 hospital admissions. The report is quite a lengthy report, but this report seeks approval to proceed with a compliant procurement process to jointly commission a children's home provider within our D2N2 framework as a block contract. We also are requesting to manage and operate a property under the ownership of Derby City Council. This is part of our developing strategy across D2N2, which incorporates some capital funding to provide small specialist children's homes. So the plan is to have 4 homes across the footprint for D2N2. Each will be 2-bed, with 1 2-bed in Derby City. The proposal is to seek approval to proceed with the commissioning of a joint D2N2 contract. The duration is initial period of 5 years, which will be open to extension via 2 further 2-year periods with a total length of 9 years. We are putting in break clauses into the contract to mitigate the risk against the contract length. Just to note, Nottinghamshire County Council will be the lead on procuring. That will be undertaken on behalf of D2N2. And Derby City Council will, as it always has been, be a signatory to this contract with similar to other joint contracts and frameworks, with the memorandum of understanding across the 4 LAs for the working of the contract. We want to continue our ambition to work in partnership, as I've stated, across the D2N2 consortia. We want to incorporate our integrated care board, social care and education to ensure that we work as partnership with the service provider to deliver this specialist home with a team around the child. We're also asking for delegation of approval to authorise our Strategic Director of People Services in consultation with the Section 151 officer and our Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Skills to approve entering into the contract and agreements associated with the procurement process to refurbish the property once we have acquired it. Part of our scope and strategic reasoning is outlined in our Children in Care Placements Commissioning and Sufficiency Strategy is about increasing our local placements in Derby City for our young people. We do find we place out of city quite a lot, and the idea of this is to work with our very complex young people to make sure they have access to all the health provisions locally, and that health provision will continue with them moving forward. The ultimate aim is for a fully integrated approach, as I've stated, and for us to work as one system to develop a regional solution to support care, education and clinical needs of the cohort. This has been designed with all 4 local authorities and the ICB over the last 12 months to ensure we incorporate all the essential components. We've also, Derby City Council along with Nottinghamshire County Council have secured funding from the DFE with match funding Derby City has agreed to match fund 300k, and we will be getting 300k from the DFE. This will enable us to source an appropriate property in an appropriate part of the city and refurb this to meet the needs of the young people. Just to note, these young people are currently, we do work with these young people. They are currently in our high cost placements, and they are funded from our children in care budget. The proposal is that during the procurement and commissioning process, we will be undertaking a robust evaluation of any pricing, and we will ensure that we will ensure value for money, and we should see these costs come down as part of the procurement process. This will also stabilise those young people who find placement moves quite a lot. So we find the resilience of providers in the community can be difficult for young people with presenting complex needs who find themselves in and out of hospital. So it is about working as a team around that child with health input into both the provider and also the young person with ongoing support. And the biggest issue for us is making sure we have positive outcomes for our children in care, for the most vulnerable people, and that they actually have a stabilisation and then move on to their forever home. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Questions? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a very interesting report, and one that I think we would all think is sensible and I think sympathetic to the needs of the children and young people involved. My two questions. Firstly, under 1.3, where it details the contract, 5-year period with an option to extend. What happens if we don't want to extend it? What happens if we're not happy with the outcomes? So that's my first point. The second point is, under 3.3, from my previous experience, there is an issue with recruiting and retention of appropriate staff with the necessary qualifications. What assurance have we got going forward that the children and young people within these establishments will have the best care possible?
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Yes, my guess, I think, I'll come to you in a second, Cathy, but my guess is that after 5 years, if it's not working, we're back at square one and have to find new placements. Yes, and that on the second point, if you will, Cathy.
Yes, of course. So we are going to be reviewing this contract on a yearly basis, so there will be an evaluation taken place each year just to look at the impact and how well we're working together. Because we're doing it as an integrated approach with the provider, if we do find that this contract is not working, we will have a lead-in period to look at solutions about how we will do things differently. So that will be a conversation with the provider. We always have clauses in our contracts to ensure that if we need to exit the contract, there is a lead-in time. Any young person in that contract, we will find suitable provision for, and then we will look, if we are really concerned, we will go out to re-tender to re-procure another provider, because for Derby City we will own the property, so it would just be bringing the provider in to actually support in the property. And then the other point, I do understand, and yes, there are issues around retention and recruitment. What we've done is really been quite specific in our service specification, and we are offering really quite a lot of training from health to support any provider with the resilience of staff. There'll be ongoing training throughout the years, and there will be a lead-in mobilisation period where we will support the provider in their recruitment to ensure they've got the right level of staff at the right skill base. So we're going to be very specific. We have engaged with the market already, and providers are aware this is coming out. It's very creative, it's new for Derby City, it's a new way of working. I think positively, if this does work and our joint commissioning with health, I think this could actually transpire into being something a lot bigger for Derby and D2N2. So there is a risk, but we will be working with the provider.
Sorry, just for clarity, will the provider be the same across the 4 sites? is it one provider for all four? And what would be the scenario if, for example, Nottingham City were not happy with their outcomes and Derby were? You know, is there an option at a later date if we want to review the contract? Is there an option to split it, if you like, or is it definitely fixed D2N2? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I suspect Sarah will say this has been thought of, but go on.
Thank you. No, they're really good questions, and yes, we obviously are going through all options. The tender is being split into two lots. So the lots are N2 because of their ICB and their footprint, and D2 because of our ICB and our footprint, and ensuring that the health offer will follow the young person within our locality. So there could be, one provider could bid for all four, they are able to. I would assume that actually we will have one provider for lot 1 and one provider for lot 2. In the beginning, we did look at one provider across the footprint, which would help us with voids, but it is also a risk if we aren't happy with that provider. So we will be working with the providers. I think we'll have 2 providers going forward concurrently. This is me looking at the future. And we would be able to work very closely as D2N2 around contract management, local contract management, and there will be a memorandum of understanding, as you've rightly said, what if one local authority isn't happy and the other is. We've talked about that and how we would work through that and the contract and the legalities. So as part of the contract, there will be a contract with the service provider, there will be a memorandum of understanding with the 4 local authorities, and there will be a memorandum of understanding with each of the 2 lots, so D2N2 with their respective ICBs, to try and cover off as much as we possibly can around the contract.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? A few observations from me, Kathy. A very interesting proposal. I understand the need for placements, difficult placements for complex needs, and the number of placements that we need, and the cost, that the current cost of those is extortionate. But this isn't. This is quite a large capital investment in terms of the city's contribution of 300,000, and I guess that the plan would be that once up and running, those placements would save much more than that on their current placements. I get that. So, but it doesn't need to be about money. It needs to be about the best placement for the child, in effect. So, I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. For 2 beds across the 2 counties, 1 2-bed in Derby. It's not the silver bullet. It's not going to cure everything, is it? It's 2 complex needs placements for children that hopefully will get what they need. But it still leaves us with an awful lot of children in care, and presumably a good proportion of those with complex needs. Just put us into perspective in terms of where we're going with the number of children in care and the level of complex needs, if you would.
Yes, of course. This cohort, so it is 2 beds. These beds are there to stabilise that young person and get them, make sure they have that ongoing access to health. So they're not there forever beds. There will be movement. It's when I say short term, you know, we're looking at very individual needs. So we can't put a specific time on, but I would say no longer than 12 months for that young person to be in these particular beds and be able to move forward and move on to, as I say, hopefully their forever home, but actually move into and be stable in the community. I think this is an aspiration to consider this level of complexity. We've got our smaller children's homes in Derby City that also will accommodate for our complex young people. So we've successfully opened 2 of those over the last 8 months. So they are longer term placements, so there will be some step down. And there is an aspiration to see how this works. If our demand and landscape shows that the numbers are increasing for these very complex young people who need that CAM service, then we can look at, if the model's working, what can we do to take this forward to open any more homes. So this in its first instance is new. It's actually going to be a different way for providers to work with us, because we're actually putting our health support in there, whereas providers will bring their health support generally along, which increases costs. So what we're doing is a very different method. So agreed, I think we need to keep, as part of the review, the landscape for the children in need, children in care numbers, which are slightly going down. We have lower numbers of the complexity, but they do go up and down. So I think it's about identifying the right young people. We also have the facility to place in Derbyshire or in Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire if we needed to, if we were full and we needed a young person to be in a bed and stabilised. That's part of the Memorandum of Understanding. So I think this is a space to have something in place that's going to start the process, review and see where we're going to go with our health colleagues.
Okay, well, good luck with it. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Just three short questions from myself, really, and they all centre around 4.9 in the report. So it mentions there that the idea would be to have two of the homes in close geographical locations in Derby and Derbyshire. I'm just asking, has Derbyshire already sort of agreed to that? I assume they already have done, but they already agreed, because we wouldn't want a surprise if it suddenly gets placed in Glossop and all of a sudden isn't that near to the city. The second one is around the travel time that it mentions in terms of that seeking of Ofsted approval for a dual children's home manager. Is 20 minutes the sort of top end limit for that? Because I've just had a bit of a look online on Google Maps. I live in Oakwood, which is one of our outer city suburbs, and from there to Borrowash, for example, would be 11 minutes. From there to Draycott is about 16, so we're not giving that much of a remit around the city for that to be. Just wondering if that 20 minutes is the travel time limit, or if there's a higher end there. And equally around that placement, are we looking for, or do we imagine we're looking for, sort of an inner city location or an outer city location? Might be too early to tell at that stage yet. I imagine there's a lot of options to be being looked at, but obviously, do we have a steer yet of where we might be looking at?
Okay, no, they're all very good questions. Derbyshire are very much on board, yes. So we've been working with Derbyshire, Nottingham City, Nottinghamshire and our ICBs over the last 12 months. I'm the lead on the project group from Derby, as the lead from Derby City. So Derbyshire will be very much part of the Memorandum of Understanding. The expectation, because Derbyshire and Nottingham City haven't got the monies to purchase a property, so as part of the tender we will be asking a provider to bring that on board. So the idea is we will have the properties in situ in Derby City, and we would expect the provider then to look at the location, so that Derbyshire's mobilisation will come after ours. We will be mobilised first, then Derbyshire will be mobilised. So the aspiration is for that within the Ofsted, so that the aspiration is really around the manager, the registered manager, being able to go between the two homes, or staff being able to go between the two homes. It's an aspiration. We've worked with Ofsted. 20 minutes is probably a very, I agree, but that's what Ofsted state. But they do work outside of that if they can see that actually it is a workable model going forward. Location-wise, we are starting to look at the properties. We are working with estate agents and estates to look at those. I can't actually say inner city or outer city at the moment. Aspiration is to make sure that we get the right area, work with the residents in that area, and work with the localities. So when we have identified properties, that's when we'll be starting to talk to people. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Kathy, thanks very much for that. Good luck with that. I think as an exec scrutiny board, we would resolve to welcome the proposal and to note the report. So, is that okay with the board? Thank you. Good, thank you. Moving on into item 9, send an alternative provision, sufficiency and capital programme. Yes.
There we go, Chair. Couldn't find the button then. Apologies. So I'm Sharon Buckby. I'm the Director for Learning, Inclusion and Skills. And firstly, thank you for receiving the paper tonight. What the purpose of the paper is to do is to set out the strategic proposals for our school place sufficiency programme for children with special educational needs and disabilities, to provide outline proposals for the use of the high needs capital funding to support the development and implementation of the sufficiency programme, and to provide an update on the schools capital programme and specific progress from those schemes previously agreed in Cabinet in 2022 and 2023. The paper itself is quite detailed. It details the work that we intend or we hope to do. It draws on a significant amount of exploratory work that we've already undertaken to look to see how best we can, A, meet the needs of our children and young people in Derby, also explore the ways in which we can enhance the existing local offer within our schools, but also extend that, and certainly look to see how we can increase the confidence of parents and carers further in the offer that's available to them. So we are looking at a development of an additional 10 enhanced resource provisions in mainstream schools and settings, the expansion of existing special schools through collaborative work with mainstream primary, where there's space, but also an expansion of the school pan in others, to establish a new post-16 send hub and capital improvements to existing schools. Now, they're detailed further from 4.7 onwards. What we're hoping from this programme to do is to reduce the number of independent placements. When we've had conversations with parents as to why they're seeking an independent placement, it is because of in the main, their confidence in provision to be able to meet needs. So this sits alongside a whole range of other pieces of work that we're doing with health to explore how we develop further integrated provision, and particularly therapeutic provision, but also working with schools, bringing in our university and special schools to enhance the capacity of local schools to meet children's needs, as well as exploring the development of new curriculum, an enhanced curriculum, drawing on best practice across the country, but also from within our existing schools. We are looking, by doing that, to reduce not only independent placements that do cost us a significant amount in our high needs block, but also reduce the amount of time it takes for children to travel. By doing that, we also know that a reduced travel means that children spend less time within their local communities, and being able to access the local provision and enabling them to be really visible and engaged members of our community. We also know that a significant number of our young people who are educated outside do not progress positively into post-16 provision or get the opportunity to take up supported internships. We believe that this will enable us to be much more compliant with our statutory duties, and as I said earlier, reduce the pressure on the high needs block. There is a lot of detail in here, so rather than going through every single part, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll open it up for questions and pick up on any of the points raised.
That's fine, Sharon, and I think the level of interest here will be as great as it is outside with parents in terms of interest in provision for their SEND children. So, any comments? Yes, that's all right.
Thank you, Sharon, for the detailed report. Point 4.4 indicates that that we have, in terms of our school-age population, a higher proportion of school-age children requiring this provision. Do you see this increasing for Derby City, the need for the provision?
Thank you, Councillor. I think there's a number of things that we've noticed. When we look at our comparative authorities and our local neighbours in particular, what we see not only for Derby and Derbyshire is a much higher demand in both Derby and Derbyshire than our local neighbours. So per 10,000 population. Now, the reasons for that can be multiple, and are indeed multiple reasons for that. It might be, and certainly what we've noticed, is that other local authorities are much more robust, I would say, in their assessment of threshold and which children would be able to receive the best support within their schools through specialists or targeted SEND support. So particularly teaching and learning strategies, which is why we've engaged with the university to look at action research, communities of practice, and think how best we can enhance the ability of our mainstream schools to meet those needs locally. But it's also a reflection of how our communities came out of the pandemic. So the increase has been most prevalent since then. And what we have to, and we are doing, working with schools, is to try and disassociate poverty and deprivation from special educational needs, because they are two different things, although one may indeed lead to an increase in the other, but for a period of time. So we are working with our schools, and we're working with parents and carers as part of those schools' partnerships and our Parent Carer Forum to get underneath some of these figures. So we do expect it to increase, but our focus must be to ensure that parents have confidence in their local schools, and that local schools have confidence that they can deliver and support. So the two run alongside each other really carefully. We're not saying we're going to do one and then another programme separately. We intend to start running the development, the confidence building, looking at strategies and support from September in much more detail. I'm not saying we haven't done it before, we have, but much greater detail now.
Thank you. This probably goes alongside Councillor Wright's question in that first thing I have to declare is an interest, I suppose, in that I've got two teenage grandchildren who have got special needs. They're autistic, and they've gone through the system of being at mainstream school, not being able to cope, and then a variety of placements since, but they are very settled and much well provided for at the moment. So just a personal interest in that regard. But I personally welcome the introduction of 10 mainstream facilities, because if children are able to remain in mainstream education, then I think it's better for the parents, for the children, and everybody possible. But where there is no provision, or the child's needs are complex enough, we need to be able to provide for them elsewhere. So there's a balance here in terms of, and I know I said it in the previous item, money and funding is important, but the needs of the child should come first. And this is a significant amount of capital investment. £24 million should be able to make a difference for our special educational needs children in the city. And I wanted the Cabinet member here to get his assurances that he would be abreast of the proposals, because I know he's got a history in terms of education, but we really need this £24 million to make the biggest difference possible. And my concern, as we spoke about before tonight's meeting, is that I understand that you weren't anticipating the paper coming just at the moment, it would have come later, but I understand the need to bring it in respect to the specific items dealt with in pink papers. I just don't want that to have any detrimental effect on the value that we can provide with the £24 million that's available.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for generosity as well for allowing me to bring this paper. I do thank you for that. It was most welcome. The partnership that we've got with schools in developing the options and how we can move forward to maximise the opportunities is something that actually I think is second to none. I've not seen the level of collaboration that there is here. We've got a proposal in the paper where we're talking about a special school expanding into a primary school next door, 2 different trusts. And to have that level of arrangement, I think, is really, really positive. And because we've got schools right across the piece and chief execs of MATs also engaged in our governance, they're really positively placed in collaborating, sharing good practice. And so I know that the support that the special schools will give and are giving to mainstream colleagues will be very much welcomed. But what I would like to do is, I mean, these are proposals that we want to be able to have the opportunity to move forward with. What I would expect is for us to come back repeatedly through the system, through executive scrutiny and through Cabinet, to demonstrate the update and the value for money and the impact from that, including outcomes for children. As you say, the most important thing, Chair.
I think we would certainly welcome regular updates on the subject. Any further questions or comments? One of the important things for people with special needs is some sort of consistency. Young people, that they don't handle change very often, very well, should I say. And within these proposals, there is, as we talked about again, the potential for children to move placements with his name, walk, closing down, Newton's Walk, changing, and potentially placements being moved into the new provision of 120 places effectively. We've over the years spent, going back as far as Councillor Bolton's regime in this, spent a lot of time talking with various parents' forums in relation to SEND, because it is controversial, it can get noisy. What are the proposals in terms of consultation with the Parent Carers Forum and other people who will have a vested interest in the way that...
Thank you, Chair. So it'll be done in a number of ways. Obviously, on an individual basis, I agree with you entirely, and you're absolutely right. Consistency and planning, forward planning, is really vital. So there would be no change in a placement unless that's planned ahead of time and there's transition. And it makes sense for that child or young person. And that has to be in consultation with the parent. So on an individual basis, that will happen. And we will come down to the 3 elements that are in the Code of Practice: needs of a child, parental preference, and public resources. But quite clearly for us, is, as you quite rightly mentioned, Chair, outcomes are vital. We wouldn't move a youngster in the midst of a programme of work, because that would not make sense. So in their individual plans, there will be projections of what they should progress to and how they should progress. If that child isn't progressing for any reason against those outcomes, then we need to understand why, and whether or not that's the school or whether or not that's the child's needs have increased. So that's that level of consultation. For any engagement or expansion, schools have to consult with their own parent base as part of the development of an enhanced resource provision or the expansion of their provision. And for us, we have to do a statutory consultation if we're increasing or changing PAN. And we will do that for the item that we've discussed earlier in detail in here and in the pink paper about that would be a statutory full consultation. And our proposal is to bring our approach to that consultation to the September the 11th Cabinet meeting. And for which then the expansion programme will be reported in October post or November post consultation. Our parent carer forums, we are developing, we've established with Contact, the national organisation, a new approach to the parent carer forum, and we have 3 new co-chairs. They are having a coordinator, they have a group of parents they're already working with, and we have a series of meetings that we are planned to take to engage with them with from September onwards. But also every parent group within each school is also being engaged. So I think our consultation has been through the schools over the last 10 months, but it's now moving forward much more closely with parents. We have looked at complaints. We've looked at a whole range of different feedback that we've received from parents to make sure that the areas that they've raised concerns about have been included in the way in which we think about an integrated therapeutic curriculum, as well as the development of the local offer. So we are looking at and reflecting on their points. But yes, you're absolutely right. That needs to be continuous and ongoing in the many different ways in which we engage.
Okay, yes, forward planning is important. And I guess if I was autistic, I might even be even more irritated that this never made the forward plan, but there you go. As a whole, I think from the exec board's point of view, I think we note the report, we welcome the proposals, but would also welcome regular updates to include specific reference to consultation with stakeholders within the community. Yeah, is that okay with everybody? All right with that? Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. So, moves us to item 10 and the final accounts. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if I don't look up because the screen's been shaking, it's making me feel sick. I don't think it's doing it on me, but if I don't make eye contact, that's why. This report outlines a summary of the Council's final outturn position, subject to external audit opinion for the 23-24 accounts. For the General Fund, the Capital Programme, Treasury Management, the Housing Revenue Account and the DSG, it's a massive report. The report gives context to the issues facing all councils, which have been well rehearsed, and provides links to further 23-24 Cabinet reports for more detail if required. There are issues to note in section 2.1 and 2.2 A to E outlines approvals requested. Section 4.1 details the revenue outturn position, which is balanced, but only after using 4.4 million of both the General Fund and Budget Risk Reserve to fund the final pressure. With predictions of around 6.5 million use of reserves at Q2, the Council put in immediate measures to mitigate this, including recruiting to staff critical vacancies only and continuing approving spending for essential items and services only. The Council has been able to reduce the use of reserves at outturn to 4.4 million. The main reasons for the overspends, which again are well rehearsed, include continuing pressures on children's and adult social care services, particularly for the cost of complex placements for vulnerable children and adults, and costs relating to homelessness and temporary accommodation. The report goes on to outline changes between the Q3 position reported to Cabinet and the final position per Directorate. There's some detailed narratives about the final general fund position from 4.2.16 of the report to 4.2.72. It's quite lengthy, but Appendix 6 gives a spreadsheet with an overview that captures all of the main variances. The capital outturn is outlined in section 4.4 of the report, showing a final outturn net underspend of circa 26 million against the final budget of 207 million. The main reason for this is slippage of 22 million, and there is detailed analysis at Appendix 2 of the report outlining the reasons for the slippage and other reasons by strategy area. Section 4.5 of the report outlines the Treasury Management final outturn position. The Treasury Management outturn is a balanced position after using £284,000 from the Treasury Management Reserve to manage the cyclical capital programme borrowing requirements. For 23-24, all prudential indicators and limits in line with the SIPFA guidance have been adhered to. All but one Treasury Management activity undertaken complied with our internal strategy, and this was on one day we breached the maximum allowance held with our Lloyds bank account, but this represents a minimal risk. Section 4.6 of this report summarises the housing revenue account for outturn. The HRA shows an outturn surplus of 4.102 million. The variance includes overachievement of income on dwelling rents alongside a lower than budgeted increase in the bad debt provision. Finally, the DSG has an outturn position of 8.246 million pressure. Overall DSG balances at the end of the financial year were 12.689 million in deficit, and this is outlined in detail in section 4.7. As I said, it's a really big report, so happy to take questions or come back to you with any emails that you would like me to.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Yes, that's more.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick one, Tony. Thank you very much for the report. It's just on the underspend on the capital programme. It was, just lost it, 26 million, I think. So we've got an underspend of 26 million. Is that underspend, because things are slipping and moving into next year, is that actually going to cost the council more? Because obviously if something's falling behind schedule, it tends to cost more. So those projects or items that have slipped into next year or whenever it might be, are they going to cost the council more in the long term? If that makes sense?
Yes. The slippages, there are different reasons for the different slippages. Some of it is about programming, some of it is about planning. At this point, we haven't got any information to say that slippage will cost us any more, because we would have built that in to next year's programme. But you're right to bring that up, that can happen.
I think the capital programme has been a point of interest in every budget for the last, certainly my last 15 years. And it's been regularly the same. But on the subject, Tony, you mentioned one particular slippage of 22 million. Was that one particular scheme? Can you just outline what that was about?
No, this £26 million variance at year end, but 22 million of that 26 is slippage. So the schemes are carrying on, but they've been slipped into future years, and it gives you details of each scheme that has slipped to come into the 22 million if the variance is over 200, which it will be.
Right,
There's
so
quite a lot of detail.
It's not one specific.
Not one specific scheme,
slip,
no.
if you like. Okay. Any other questions?
But if you want to go through them schemes and highlight any questions, I'll email you some more detail.
Whilst the board are thinking of anything else that they want to ask you, I'll touch on you talked about it being balanced by the use of 200 plus in funding from the Treasury Management Reserve. So tell me about that. How does that work? How much have we got in the Treasury Management Reserve?
We used about 286. I'm not sure what we've got in the Treasury Management Reserve, but because of the way the capital programme works, cyclical and slippage, we do, if we've got any underspends in TM, we put them into the reserve to use for next year, because we do need it. It's just it might have underspent in one year and gone forward into the next year. So we've got a reserve that manages the flow. It's got 3.253 million in it at the moment. It's planned to be used this year. That's on page 34 in the statement of the reserves that gives you all the current balances.
Okay. In layman's term, that sounds a bit like a slush fund to me, to be able to cover off any shortfalls or any extra funding that's needed. Has that been a regular thing? Is that a consistent thing that we do in terms of treasury management?
Yes, Chair, because of the way the capital programme works and the ebbs and flows, it doesn't fit into a year. So yes, we take 2 man from it and we'll look at it when we set in the MTFP and use it there.
Okay, I guess that just hurts a little bit when every resident in the city is experiencing trouble with long grass and potholes and missed bins and things. I think it feels like I don't know, maybe more priority needs to be given to day-to-day services that are suffering on the back of the budget pressures that we have. Okay, just an observation from myself, I suppose. The other point I was going to ask you about was the collection rates. You recall that when we went through the budget process, there was a suggestion that the collection rate, anticipated collection rate, could be improved, increased, because we were low in terms of collection rates compared to our comparators, and we should have more ambition in collecting the council tax and things. I understand we have indeed collected more than anticipated. Is that the case?
For the outturn for last year, I would have to go back and do a bit of a calculation for you. I wouldn't like to say what the rates were now because I've not got them in front of me, but I can do you a piece of work just showing you what we thought it would be in the comparison and send it round to you all.
And what the actual outcome was will be of interest to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, Councillor Hall.
Cheers, Chair. Thank you very much. I hope I'm reading the right appendix here, so apologies, Tony, if I've got slightly confused. But in the priority projects and strategic risks, in the Q4 status, the Guildhall and Derby and Derbyshire Waste Treatment Centre are amber red, but it doesn't, that's all it states, amber red. I may be reading the wrong appendices. It might be for the next item. Is it the next item? I've got ahead of myself. Right. Ignore me, Chair, but that's my question for when we get on to the next item.
Always getting you ahead of yourself, Councillor Moore. Any other points, questions, Tony? It's a long, complex report, no doubt. There's a lot of work gone into it, Tony, and will be read and inwardly digested for a while. And any questions that come to you, we can forward to you by email or whatever. So. Okay, thank you for that. Then, in those terms, the Exec Scrutiny Board note the paper. Thank you. Contract and financial matters. Tony.
Yeah, I'll just do a brief summary of this. So, financial matters deals with 2 main items. The first is to approve the direct award of a contract of up to £180,000 to Community Action Derby to coordinate and deliver a project supporting carers. These carers are those not currently assessing support services. This service is on behalf of Derby City and Derbyshire County Council and is funded from the Accelerating Reform Fund. The project intends to work with these communities to identify the needs and options to inform commissioning approaches. The Council consider CAD to be the only organisation in the city with the experience, skills and relationships to effectively deliver this project. You want to take?
You can do, Tony, but they seem inextricably linked, if I'm not mistaken. Go on.
So the second is to improve a contract waiver to extend the contract to the Citizens Advice Mid-Mercia for the delivery of universal services for carers in Derby at a value of £246,000. These services for carers provides a range of support with the aim of supporting well-being, building resilience and supporting carers to maintain their role. This is provided through offering information, signposting and guidance, training and education, wellbeing activities, facilitating peer support and emergency planning. There are a number of carer-related activities and improvements currently in train, and recommissioning the service for April 25 would mean needing to commence the process now and being unable to consider these developments and improvements. Therefore, a contract waiver is recommended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to propose the blindingly obvious question. Are these not the same? Could this not be rolled into one service? Or what's happening? Why do we need two? And that actually add up to a significant amount of funding, nearly £500,000.
Hi, Chair. Sorry, I did say that I would come along and support with the questions for this. Of course. They are different. The carers service that's been delivered by Citizens Advice Mercia has been in situ for a while, and the service, adult social care, really want to work with our carers to make sure we deliver the best service to the carers. The contract itself has been looked at and explored about how we can deliver a better service. The grant funding that's come through with the bid with Derbyshire County Council is a separate entity with a very short piece of work that will help support us looking at areas that we might not be able to do in the commissioning service, but will feed into the contract. So it is a separate grant just for those three areas mentioned in the report. So Derby City will be leading on that one area about communities that aren't currently accessing support services, and there are quite a few. And it will enable us to feed into the review of the contracts for the carers service to actually make sure we're going out with a service specification that's going to deliver for future planning, to make sure we're working with carers more appropriately. So they interlink in the way that the grant and the work that CAD will do will feed into the service specification and allow us to actually make a more robust contract with any provider going forward.
Okay, thank you. I guess it is a significant total amount of funding, and it's absolutely vital, particularly young carers are supported. But again, we want to do it in the most cost-efficient and effective way, so I'm sure that's well in your considerations along the way. Any questions, comments? No? In that case, then I think we will resolve to note the report and wish you good luck with it. Okay. Good. Where does that take us? Takes us to item 12 and performance and the annual report and review of performance 23-24. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's me. I'm Sarah.
So just before we go into the main body of the report, I don't know if anyone else has got the same as I've got, but Appendix 1, the report in there is full of sort of lines that are missing and filled with a load of random capital letters. It makes the report really difficult to follow and read. I thought, because I proofread this one while I was in an airport in Prague, and I thought it might have been because I was there it wasn't working, but it does, the report in itself in the appendix, it's quite hard to read.
So the public-facing one?
Yeah, the public-facing one. I don't know if the particular report at Appendix 1 could be recirculated
Absolutely.
to us as councillors, that'd be great.
Absolutely, I apologise for that. Today's my first day back from leave, so I hadn't realised there'd been an issue, and actually the version I'm looking at is beautiful. What I would say is, could I recommend that councillors look at the edition that went to audit and governance in July, because I assume, although it has been updated since then, that version at least will be readable. So starting off with that will, while you're all looking for that on, if you have your laptop with you or a colleague next to you, then at least you'll get a sight of the latest version without any anomalies in the publication. But I'll get it updated on the system. So I'm here to present two reports. So I think I was introducing myself. I think most of you know me, but I'm Sarah Walker. I'm the Head of Strategy, Performance and Partnerships. So the first report, Chair, I'm here to present is the annual report for 2023-24. So that's obviously covering the period from April 2023 through to March 2024. The report provides officers, councillors, partners and public with a high-level summary of what has been delivered over the last 12 months, alongside some of the challenges that we have faced along the way. We do not have a statutory duty to publish an annual report, but it is good practice to do so, and we do so every year. It absolutely contributes towards our duty to deliver best value for the city and alongside the Code of Recommended Practice on Local Government Transparency. So the report is presented in two different parts. So Appendix 1 is the part that you've had challenges with, but hopefully you've got sight of a cleaner version. And this is a summative overview of what we have delivered as a city, obviously from a council perspective, but we absolutely have to recognise that this represents a lot of partnership activity as well, in line with the city and the council plan. So it's structured around the themes of green, growth, vibrant, resilient and working smarter. And it also provides a high-level overview of our financial position. So there's that real balance in terms of value for money of what we've spent and what's been delivered for that. The second appendices presents a full overview of commitments from the 2023-24 Council Delivery Plan, which includes our priority projects, milestones, performance measures and the strategic risks as they were at the end of the year. This is deliberately summative because actually colleagues receive the updates at the end of every quarter as part of our performance monitoring reports, which I'll come on to talk to you about in a moment. So as I've mentioned, the report was considered by Audit and Governance Committee in July. We have made some changes to the report as a result of feedback received. Obviously, if you're looking at that edition of the report, you won't see some of those tweaks, but I'll make sure that the updated version is circulated in the morning. And both editions, Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, will be published on the Council website by the end of August. I wasn't proposing to go through the detail of the report because obviously I'm following on from this. I'm going to talk about Q4, which will give me an opportunity to talk about some of the achievements that we've delivered. But I think it's a real opportunity for us to celebrate the work that has been delivered over the last year against a backdrop of challenges, ongoing challenges for both the city and for the council and our stakeholders. And the recommendation to Cabinet is to note the annual report and the annual review of performance prior to publication. But I'd really welcome any comments prior to that going forward in terms of that final publication, and just thank those members of Audit and Governance for theirs that have come through already.
Thank you, Sarah. And just for my information, well, for everybody's information, I suppose, the council plan, the current council plan, runs until when?
The current council plan runs until 2025, so March 2025. So attached with the performance report, which is the next item, is the updated council delivery plan. But the current overarching council plan, which has those 4 citywide themes and the theme of working smarter for us as a council, runs until 2025.
So there are some updates to the plan, but it's not been totally reviewed and changed until 2025?
Yep, so obviously I was going to cover that in the next report, but the council delivery plan is a dynamic document. So we made the choice a number of years ago to try and ensure that the work that we're delivering against the commitments made in the summative council plan, which is our overarching strategic direction for the city, remain relevant and up to date. So there is an updated annual plan presented as Appendix 3 in the report that's coming up. So the Q4 monitoring report contains that, but we will still continue to ensure that we are challenging and reviewing the content of it on a quarterly basis to ensure if new pressures emerge that need response in terms of they need to be set as a priority for the organisation, they're reflected within the document. And that's both from a priority project perspective, an objective perspective, and also our performance measures in terms of we have found that actually, whilst it's not been significant change, things have emerged and things have changed within the monitoring cycle of a year that has required that. But that is all. We provide all of those updates as part of the quarterly monitoring report. So obviously you've got the annual refresh for consideration today as part of the Q4 report, but then if we propose any changes, that's always reported as part of the monitoring reports that Cabinet receive and obviously consequently executive scrutiny.
Okay, so questions on the annual report or the review of performance? None, I don't think. Sarah, you've obviously pleased everybody with it until Councillor Mulhall thought of something.
Cheers, Chairman. Thank you very much. Right, so the first one is around the Guildhall. So the Guildhall is now amber red in the matrix, however, in the appendices, it doesn't really go into much detail as to, well, what does that red mean? Because in the little sort of section next to it, it talks around what the £20 million from the levelling up funding that was given to it is going to go on. So it's going to go on new front of house experience with enhanced foyer, with a new ground floor cafe, box office opening into the market space, and increasing the capacity of the auditorium to 280 people, which all sounds absolutely fantastic. But I'm concerned about why is it a red amber? What's driving that? Because obviously I'm pretty certain that this funding from the department was stipulated on it had to be spent before a certain date. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chair. I feel like I want to say March 2026, but I'm not 100% sure. But there's like a deadline where the money has to be spent by. So is that what the red means, that there's a possibility that we may miss that deadline and lose the funding? What's driving that?
I think you're right in that there is a target date for the spend, or there was. Whether the current government changed anything in that regard, but I suspect the red amber is more about the total cost of the proposal as stands. We knew several years ago when it was looked at that the potential cost was significantly more than that, 20 million, and I don't think those budgets or estimates have been fully worked up yet. Sarah, you might be able to help us on a bit of that.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is in the report that I'm about to go on to do an update on. Did you want me to respond to the question now, or because they're kind of two crossover, don't they? That's absolutely fine. So if I can refer you, so I can't, in terms of the specifics of that scheme, I think it would probably be best that the lead officers provide an update on that. But what I can say is that there's a number of different criteria against which we would assess and evaluate our projects in terms of their overall classification. So they are in Appendix 1 of the Q4 monitoring report at the very end. I think they're actually on page 38. So it could be anything from the budget position or delivery against key milestones, realisation of benefits, or the scope of the project has changed. There's a number of different criteria against which we will look to evaluate where a project currently is and also where we think it will be in line with our overall programme of activity for that project. So at that point in time, there could be a number of different aspects of delivery. Now, this was obviously at the end of March, so I think that given the fact we're in August, the most suitable and appropriate way forward would be to get an update from the officers as where we are now, because I suspect there may have been changes. Yeah, absolutely. It's really confusing because actually the summaries are contained within Appendix 2. So I don't know which report you were looking at, which is why both of them together can be a little bit confusing. It's absolutely fine. So if I go back to just a bit of an overview in terms of Q4, and helpfully pull out, I think, some of the key achievements and some of the risks, and then come back to any questions, if that's okay, Chair. So the Q4 Performance Monitoring Report is a standard report that's received by Cabinet and the committee to provide an overview of delivery against commitments that we make in our council delivery plan. And this is relevant for the year 2023-24. The Q4 report specifically represents the period from January to March. However, many areas are monitored cumulatively, so are likely to cover the entire period, particularly in relation to some of our performance results as well. So, as with previous reports, it presents a summary of achievements in relation to our priority projects, performance measures, milestones, and it also identifies our strategic risks. So at the end of March 2024, there were 65% of our performance measures that achieved target. What I would say is comparing year on year, the end of Q4 always has to be treated with caution because the basket of measures against which we are monitoring changes. and also the targets will change. But what I can say is that 55% of the measures that we reported at the end of Q3 had seen an improvement between Q3 and Q4, showing that obviously sustained or improved direction of travel. So of the milestones that we were monitoring in 23-24, 93% had been completed or were reported as on track. Many of these have been carried forward. We'll come on to the Appendix 3 in a moment, but many of them have been carried forward as we recognise that the delivery would take longer than a year, and obviously that is then reflected within the overarching council delivery plan. So 67% of our priority projects were assessed as green or amber green, and as I say, the criteria against which what that looks like is contained within Appendix 1. And we had 16 strategic risks at the end of March. And key changes, you can find those in paragraph 4.9 of the covering report, or in the start of Appendix 1. There is a nice summative overview of some of the changes that we've had in relation to our priority projects and our strategic risks. What I would say is certainly at the end of this financial year, we saw the addition of some new opportunity risks, which I think is really positive, as we're still trying to ensure that we're balancing that threat and opportunity environment within which we're working. So that was pleasing at the end of the year. So just to pick out a number of achievements, if that's okay, against each of the themes in the council delivery plan, and I will be quick, there aren't many, but I think it's nice to recognise some of this. So under our theme of green, we've made progress with the Sustainable Derby Board, working in partnership, obviously across the city, to tackle climate change. And we've made a lot of positive progress around some of our mobility programmes. So a lot of these are now in delivery phase, and again that was one of those grant funded activities where we had a time period against which we had to spend the funding, and a lot of that has moved forward really pleasingly. From a growth perspective, we've created nearly just shy of 425 jobs over the last year, and 98 businesses have been supported. We're a key stakeholder in the East Midlands Investment Zone, have worked across the region to facilitate the East Midlands Combined County Authority, and obviously associated growth, benefits that will deliver from a growth perspective. We have worked collaboratively to deliver or improve more than 270 dwellings and shared houses to meet the decent home standards, and 172 affordable new homes have been delivered. However, we know housing is a significant risk, not just for Derby City, but it's been a risk reported nationally. And as a consequence, our strategic risk score within this area has increased. The maximum score was 16. So we know that's a priority area for us to focus on going forward, and is important to so many different aspects of life for our communities and the city as a whole, which is a reason we're focusing on that. From a vibrancy perspective, obviously some of the key city centre projects have already been picked up, but we're making positive progress in relation to Market Hall and Becketwell. And we continue to facilitate the delivery of a events programme across the city to support our communities and residents to engage with some of the cultural offering, or equally to bring people into the city. So we had over 371,000 attendances at Derby Live, produced, presented and supported events and performances, which is really positive. And within the report, there's a more detailed overview of some of the activity that's been delivered. From a resilient perspective, the football hub opened, which I think was a really positive achievement. And we've done a lot of work to either support the health and well-being of our communities, albeit whether that's through our Live Well checks, or to support some of our most vulnerable to remain independent and at home in a way that is healthy for them. So that could be through their participation in falls prevention, or it could be through the interventions of the Healthy Housing Hub or the Handy Person Service. We're in the second year of our Family Hub activity, so in terms of that Great Start for Life activity that we know is crucially important to where we go to, together as a city with our young people, and we had over 11,000 people visiting a Family Hub just in Q4 of this year, so that was from January to March. We've launched the Foster for East Midlands, which has been is obviously delivering initial outcomes in terms of those recruitment inquiries, and we are improving the timeliness of some of our adult social care activity to make sure that people are getting the right response at the right time, and that we are absolutely prioritising those high-risk areas. And finally, from a working smarter perspective, and I know it's one that Scrutiny colleagues is close to your heart, is we have seen a reduction in the total number of working days lost to sickness absence. So whilst we've not delivered against the ambitious target we set, we were down at just shy of 12 days at 12.08 days, compared to a position of 13.34 days at the end of the last financial year. And obviously work has progressed in the launch of our AI programme, and that is also represented in the Strategic Risk Register as an opportunity. There are always opportunities for further improvement and development and threats to delivery. So within the covering report, paragraph 4.9 to 4.12 presents a summary of these, and actually Appendix 2 provides an overview of the performance measures where either they've not achieved target or we've seen a deterioration or a decline in delivery or outcomes, so that we can absolutely ensure we remain focused on those, because the reason we're doing this is to support better outcomes for the city and achieve what we've set out within the council plan. And finally, Appendix 3 presents the revised council delivery plan that we'll use as the basis for our monitoring framework for 24-25. But as I've mentioned, it will be a dynamic plan, so if there are things that emerge that need to be represented within the plan, obviously if there is any particular challenges through scrutiny, that can be something that we'll take back and review and consider as we move forward. But any changes always come back through in terms of ensuring you have oversight of that. So in terms of what Cabinet are asked to do is to note the latest performance position, obviously paying particular attention to our strategic risks and our emerging priorities for improvement, which are set out in Appendix 1 and 2. To note there are no areas recommended for either a performance surgery or a risk. What I would say within this context is we've done a lot of work, and I know a number of members of executive scrutiny are also on audit and governance, and we've done a lot of work through deep dive risk assessments that are reported through to audit and governance on a regular basis. And from a performance perspective, we've done a lot through targeted reviews of specific aspects of performance that are reflected within the report, including responding to, obviously, inspection and assessment activity. And finally, Cabinet are asked to approve the Council's delivery plan that are in Appendix 3. And I'm happy to take any other questions around particular ratings. But what I would say is, obviously, this is the position as at the end of March. So it might be that in some instances it's better to get an update from the lead officers.
Thank you, Sarah. Very detailed report. Thank you for all your efforts in that regard. I like to be positive, whenever I possibly can, and you've just gone through 9 or 10 big positives for the city. Some of which were a long time in the making. It's great to see them coming to fruition. And I don't want to dwell on any particular one, but we don't often shout enough about the positives in the city, and we should do a lot more. We know what they are; they're included in reports, but we seem to want to focus on the negatives. So, I'm going to ask you just your top 3 in terms of the red risk, strategic risks. You've highlighted the positives, but you haven't actually highlighted the strategic main risks.
Okay, so from a strategic risk perspective, we do have a small number that are at the maximum score of 16. And this is off the top of my head without going into the report. So obviously the housing risk was escalated in terms of the score. That went up to 16. We know we have 2 financial risks contained within our strategic risk register, both delivery of our in-year budget, which continues to always be an ongoing risk, alongside our MTFP. So I think they would probably be areas that we have to recognise within our strategic risk register.
What are those 2, Sarah?
Pardon?
What are those 2 particular areas?
So in terms of those risks, so the risks are contained, let me find them for you. So we have our ability to deliver against our current annual revenue budget. So they're on in the appendices, page 35, and our ability to deliver a balanced medium-term financial plan. They are both at the maximum score of 16, as is the housing risk. And I think the other one that I would probably pick up as at the end of Q4, because it was something that was relatively topical at the time, would be cyber threats to our systems, given the fact that other public organisations had fallen victim to that, and we're seeing increasing examples of that, and that is again a risk. It is the maximum score of 16. What I would say is that there are adequate mitigations in place in those areas, and if you needed more detail, it would obviously be the risk leads that you'd need to speak to.
And where does the waste plan feature in terms of our risks?
It's not currently on the strategic risk register as at the end of Q4. Obviously, that would be something that we'd need to revisit as part of the refresh of the reports. And again, I'd just recommend that that's probably a conversation for the lead officers.
I suspect you might get some either more comment or question on that, but Councillor Moore-Hall first.
Cheers, Chairman. Thank you very much. I've got quite a few questions, but I'll just focus on one particular one at the moment. So, obviously, really good news to see that the average working days taken off for sickness is reducing. Obviously, it's not reduced as much as I think all of us would have liked, but hey, a reduction's a reduction. But I think what would be really interesting is to now understand where, particularly in the council workforce, is this amount of sickness focused on? Because so just thinking out loud, I would suggest that it's probably in the more sort of manual areas of work. So for street pride, in particular, binmen. I suspect is probably an area where we have an awful lot of sickness just due to the manual labour of the work. And I don't know whether that's correlating with, obviously, bins in my local area not getting picked up. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But I think it'd be interesting to understand if that is an area of concern and what mitigations then can the council put in place to try and sort of, you know, alleviate that. If that makes sense, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. We do analysis on sickness across the organisation. So we do have a sickness absence working group. We've had it in place for a number of years, and we're currently looking at an updated performance dashboard, what that might look like. The most prevalent reason for sickness at the end of 23-24 was actually stress and anxiety, followed by I think post-operative recovery, and then musculoskeletal. I'd have to refer to the report. So yes, at 21.37%, it was stress and anxiety, then musculoskeletal, and then post-operative recovery. So there are top three areas of sickness. What I would say is we look at trends across a period of time, and we will look by different service areas and also consider what that means in terms of the volume of colleagues within that area as well. So we're doing a lot of work within this space, overseen through the People and Culture Board, to try and ensure that we have a healthy workforce and that our plans and strategies from a wellbeing perspective, and when I think about wellbeing, I'm thinking, you know, whether you're talking musculoskeletal from a health and safety perspective or beyond from a stress and anxiety, are having the impact that they are intended to have. And that's something that obviously we can provide further updates on, because that's reflected within the report as a standard performance measure, but also we do have objectives within that area as well.
Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you for the report, Sarah. Can I just draw your attention to the council plan, particularly the section that focuses on reduced inequality with healthier and wealthier residents, please. National statistics in terms of childhood poverty across the country situates Derby as being in the list of the largest group cities where there is high poverty, childhood poverty. In fact, I think the average is 26.1, whereas Derby's childhood poverty is 32.4. And if we look at the situation of poverty in the ward that I represent, Arboretum, the poverty, childhood poverty, is 3 times that of the national average. So I just want to get a sense of what inroads, if any, is being made in tackling poverty and inequality in areas such as Arboretum. Thank you. Thank you. That's a really good question, and it's a really big question
for me to respond to, given the multifaceted nature of it. What I would say is that we have, within the document, obviously, on page 11 of Appendix 3, we do have working with our partners to develop an anti-poverty strategy. That's only one aspect of it. We recognise that actually, and we were talking about it within an earlier paper, it is a systemic societal issue that we need to come at from a number of different angles. So I would say, actually, we've done a lot of work to galvanise the partnership within this space. The partnership have actually done a lot of work within this space, and we are... so some of it was targeted over the last year around response to the cost of living and specifically providing that short-term support for families, children, individuals that are in poverty or that need access to immediate response. And we've worked incredibly well within that space, and I think there was an update to corporate scrutiny very recently around some of the impact that we've had within that area. But actually to address and provide a long-term sustainable response to poverty is not something that I think we would necessarily be able to deliver within a year. It is a generational programme of activity, and all that we're doing, whether that's through the East Midlands County Combined Authority, in terms of that growth, the skills agenda, there are lots of different aspects to this that I think run throughout the plan. But I think the first point is trying to galvanise people back together to look at what does our strategy as a city look like for this, and what are our measures of success in the short, medium and long term, recognising that actually the figures that you've just quoted are likely to remain the same for a while, but actually what are the measures that we would look to see a difference in that will allow us to evaluate the difference we're making as a city. So what I would say is it's contained within the plan. I think if we look at specific projects or examples, we can evidence that we're making a difference, but there's absolutely a significant more amount that needs to be done, but the council can't deliver that on its own. It's absolutely got to sit within the partnership agenda, which is where it is currently positioned, but we are appropriately reflecting it within the plan as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just first of all, to say thank you to Sarah and everyone who's been involved in pulling this report together. It's obvious there's an awful lot of work gone into it, so I think it is important and really useful to have this overview of the whole activity of the local authority. As you've said, Chair, to celebrate some of the successes which sometimes go unnoticed, but also to highlight some of the risks as well, so that us as councillors and the public are well informed as to what they are. So thank you, Sarah. It is really important that we receive this document. Just a question in terms of a risk, which is, I think it's at 16, which I think is the highest, to do with the climate change action plan. Now, looking at it, there seems to be an awful lot of activity included in the climate change action plan, which is to be released in autumn. So I guess the question is, do you have a bit more information about what the risk is and why that is as a red as it is?
Yeah, so obviously within the council plan, we've made the commitment of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2035. We're in 2024, and I think that we have to identify the possible threat that we may not deliver against that target. Now, we are working collectively as a city through the Sustainable Derby Board to think broader than the council, and we are updating, obviously, the climate change action plan from a climate perspective. What we do know, however, is that some decisions that we may want to make to become net zero may come with a financial cost that may not be affordable to us as an organisation. So the risk has been identified as a threat to highlight the possibility that we may not achieve against that target. That doesn't necessarily mean that we won't make progress. It doesn't necessarily mean that we won't hit that target. What it is doing is identifying the threat level to us as a city against the commitment we've made, and we are working to mitigate that through a number of different avenues. I can happily get you the detail of the risk. What I would say is it's all published on My Derby as well. So all of the strategic risk register is available, where you can have the detail in terms of the causes, the impact, the mitigations and controls, although I'm happy to circulate that if it would add value as well. But certainly at this point, I think it's a recognition of the challenges that not just the council are facing, but again, it's another big one, isn't it, alongside poverty, that society is facing in terms of our response to this. And we've absolutely got to acknowledge the threat level that exists.
Thank you. If there's no other further questions, Councillor Wright, you want to come back?
If you don't mind. Sorry, I'm turning myself off. Yeah, just going back to your response, Sarah, to my question. Well, thank you very much for the response. I think we all recognise that tackling inequality and poverty, particularly where we're talking about systemic and endemic structural issues, that it is a challenge, and it's something that the authority cannot do on its own. But I suppose what one is talking about here is the leadership in tackling these structural matters. And, you know, we do have over decades in this country where initiatives have been put in place and have proved to be successful. And I think the obvious one is the Sure Start as a form of intervention, the difference that it made to families and children. So I suppose it's about the sorts of initiatives and provision that we put in place, knowing that we are dealing with structural issues, but these structural issues should not be seen as being intractable. The fact is we need to look at how we amass resources to assist here and constantly monitor and review how we set about tackling the issue of deprivation, inequality and poverty in our city. Thank you.
You make a good point, Councillor Wright, but I'm not sure what the question is to Sarah and how she can add to what she already said. But Sarah,
Chair, it's not
a statement.
Following up from what I asked earlier. Thank you.
All right. Well, in the absence of any further questions or comments, I think we should, as a board, note the reports. But I also think we should ask the responsible officer and the cabinet member why the waste plant doesn't appear on the risk register. And if it was on the risk register, what would it be assessed at in terms of the level of risk? Is that okay? Okay. You got that, Stephen? Yeah. Okay, moving on then. Item 14 is the exclusion of press and public. I don't think we have any, but I'll go through the motions anyway. I need to propose that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Okay? I think we